what happens is people become codependent. People, for various reasons, intertwine their mental health with somebody else's well being and make it dependent on the other person. And one of the most simplest reasons why they do it is they feel the whole world is on their shoulders. They're the only one in the world that this girl or boy is willing to open up to trust, to talk to. And so if I don't save their life, they're as good as dead. I have to carry the entire world on my shoulders. And if I take a break for 1 second, something might happen. And sometimes we help somebody so much to the exclusion of involving a teacher, involving a therapist, involving their parents, that they don't even get the help that they needed anyways.
Hey, I'm Esther, and you are listening to On Your Own, the podcast for Jewish girls living away from home. Each week, we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you confidently navigate life on your own so you can achieve real growth and independence and take ownership of this foundational stage of your life. For additional resources, tips, and to stay up to date on future episodes, sign up for the On Your Own newsletter, linked below in the description. Looking forward to spending some time with you today. And now, to this week's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of On Your Own. My guest today is Avi Tenenbaum. Avi is a psychologist specializing in psychological first aid, who has worked with many young men and women living on their own to improve their mental health. In today's episode, we discuss the connection between leaving home for the first time and your mental health, the most common challenges facing young women in his practice, what to do if a friend mentions that they want to harm themselves or to die, how to help the people that you care about without becoming too wrapped up into their problems, what factors make you more susceptible to mental health challenges and what you can do about it, and much more. We've just finished celebrating Hanukkah, which is all about light. Although from my experience living on my own, Hanukkah time and the time, right afterwards, Teves time, was always really challenging. You're still kind of not used to your new environment fully, not fully settled in. It becomes dark and cold and rainy, and your family may have been getting together over Hanukkah and you were the one left out and far away. Hanukkah was always a real challenge for me when I wasn't home. And so, yeah, if you're feeling that right now, just sending hugs. And if you're struggling right now, I really do get it. Okay, so to today's episode, we covered a lot in this one conversation. Avi really gives you a whole new level of awareness about mental health and also some really practical ways to help your friends or family who are struggling. We talk about some heavy topics like suicide and trauma and mental illness, so just a heads up. I do think that even if, Baruch Hashem, these are not relevant topics to you right now, they definitely are to someone that you know and care about. So I do highly recommend giving it a listen. Okay, let's get to the episode. What is the connection that you've seen between leaving home for the first time and its effect on mental health?
I think we don't value enough the social part of who we are. And to be a healthy, happy person, we have to belong somewhere. And one of the most important things for mental health is our home. And when we leave our home, people are homesick. They're in a new country, they're in a different language, a different culture. They don't have everything that they need. And it might be that they technically have food, they have a bed, maybe they have some friends. And yet, people still yearn to be elsewhere because there's still something missing. There's the familiarity, there's the safety, there's the security of that place called home. And we have sayings in English, there's no place like home. And there are other sayings that describe that home is not a place, it's a feeling. And I really understand that idea. And it's a place where you're completely non judged, nobody asks questions on you. It's a place you can just plop down and all your needs are taken care of. And I think we forget as we learn Torah or psychology and we get very sophisticated, On top of all of the sophistication, we're people and we have very basic, simple needs. And we have social health. And so there's the biggest connection in the world between leaving home for the first time and our mental health. It's a challenging time. And that's not even talking about when you go to a new school, you have to make new friends, and you may or may not be so successful for various reasons. A lot of people have struggles in that. Sometimes people struggle academically, and now we don't have good friends because maybe we're in a school where they value who's the best student, and I struggle because I have ADHD or some learning issue, whatever it is. So there could be so many challenges leaving home, going to a new place. You either will seamlessly fit into the new place or you won't, and that can really put you on a trajectory for the rest
Very
of the year.
interesting. You used the word belong, and I think it's so interesting because if you don't feel like you have a place where you belong, it probably just exacerbates whatever is already going on for you or is already tough because you don't have that place to run back to where you could just be yourself and reconnect. And so that makes a lot of sense that it would just either create new mental health challenges or even just exacerbate something that was more under the surface when you were at home. What would you say is the biggest misunderstanding that young adults today have about the topic of mental health?
Yeah, I think if you want to oversimplify the timeline of history, what happened was once upon a time, arguably, and this is not such a simple thing to say, but arguably there were certain periods in history where we didn't know about mental health issues and we didn't know how to deal with them. And then suddenly we got a lot of awareness, and there's therapy and psychiatry and all sorts of amazing things. But I think there's a caveat to that. There's a asterisk, which is that just because we have amazing things, it doesn't mean life's challenges will vanish quickly. There's going to be people in life that we can't fix because they don't want to be fixed. They're going to be abusive. They're going to be difficult. There's going to be traumas that happen to us. And whether we like it or not, this is what happened to us when we were young or when we were older. And to get rid of trauma is challenging. To get rid of an addiction is a lifelong process. And so there's this subliminal message which says, "Oh, go for therapy, ask for help." And there's like a hidden message in that, which is if you ask for help, that's all you need to do, and it's that easy. It's also not that easy, but I don't want to discourage anybody. I myself have had many mental health issues. I've gone for therapy, and it was worth every minute that I invested. And I have a great life, and I'm super happy as a person, and I try to be successful, and I have a family and a house and a car and all those things. But it is a lifelong journey. So we're in this for the long run, and I think people underestimate that. They think about their symptoms. They say, "Oh, I'm feeling this symptom. Let me Google which type of therapy erases those symptoms," and then they say, "Oh wow, this is proven to help." They do it 12 times, and they say, "Hey, I'm flabbergasted. How could I still be struggling?" And I think life is an adventure. We're challenged, and here we are, and we gotta keep going and go against the grain. But the more we do, the bigger people we become, the bigger character we develop. And not only hopefully will we get some relief of our symptoms, we will or won't, I don't know, hopefully we will, but our character certainly will grow. Our fortitude will grow, our resilience in life will grow.
So, what I'm hearing is that on the one hand, it's not like this quick fix solution. Mental health, you can't just slap a band aid on it, figure out the right solution, it'll go away. But on the other hand, we are resilient and we're strong, and we should trust ourselves and others to be able to help them through this journey. So, there's these two things kind of going on at the same time. What is the most common mental health challenge among young women that you've noticed in your practice?
That's a very interesting and particular question, um, because everybody approaches the world from a different perspective. And my perspective is that I deal a lot with trauma and with addiction. Um, I've seen that young women struggle with trauma and addiction, just like boys and men. I think that when it comes to uh, sexual matters, so it's more taboo for women
Mm.
to talk about it and receive help for it because I think they're expected to be more in control of themselves and maybe physiologically, scientifically, they have less libido than men. And so it's more shameful and there's more stigma about women having those sort of problems. In fact, I heard a story literally this morning from somebody I met about a friend of theirs, and this didn't happen recently. It happened maybe 20 years ago. But it was about a certain woman who was dressed in a provocative way, according to the one that told me the story. And they got in a car accident, and first responders showed up to this car accident, and they saw this woman dressed in this provocative way, and they said, "Oh, she's one of those. Let's not even bother helping her." In other words, like there's such a stigma. This was in New York about 25 years ago, 20 years ago. So it's like they didn't even help this woman because they said, "Oh, she's one of these loose women. She's not even deserving of being saved." So she ended up finding out that that's what happened. I don't know how she found out, and she ended up prosecuting and winning the court case about this, and earning money from that. But there's that type of stigma that's very, very particularly related to women and their self-control and the choices they make and what's their fault and not their fault. Um, yeah, I've dealt with some young women who have come to Israel because I live in Israel 22 years, that have fallen into the hands of some pretty sadistic boys that have done some really bad things to these young women. And I would urge them to be wise and learn who to make relationships with, who to trust, how much to trust. I see that young women and young men misuse the word friend all the time. And to them, friend means anybody and anything. Oh, he's a good friend of mine, she's a good friend of mine. And I use that word very sparingly. I'll be friendly with anybody because I try to be a nice person. I'll try to give trust, but you can't easily trust everybody, and especially a young woman. They have to be careful.
So just because you're a woman, you're not immune to things like addiction or trauma and
Or people
or
manipulating
people
you.
manipulating you. And can I add? Would you say even if you're a frum woman? Could I? Would you add that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I work with from women.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Even if you're a religious woman, there's we're all first of all we're all susceptible equally to everything,
Hmm.
whether it's addiction, eating disorders, depression, etc., suicidality, and manipulation, which is not a mental health issue, but it certainly is a bad problem and can lead to a lot of really scary things, a lot of really not good things. And we're a fortress, and we have to learn who we let into our fortress and who not. I think some people don't let anybody in, and that's a mistake. And I think other people that I'm referring to let everybody in instantly because they have good character traits, they want to be nice, and they don't always understand who's taking advantage of them, what they're going to ask from them soon, whether it's money or access to their body or all sorts of things that maybe you don't want to give, and they pressure you. And before you know it, you've done all sorts of things, and you've been all sorts of places, and you regret it. And that I've seen a bunch of times.
Wow. So what advice would you give to somebody who has been through something like that, a young woman?
Well, somebody who's been already through something like that, I would say that you have trauma, and I understand why you don't trust people and why you're not willing to trust men or be in relationships in general. And maybe the system failed you. And I see that a lot of young people perceive that the system failed them. And the system might include their teachers. They perceive that their teachers failed them. Maybe they once asked for help and didn't really get it in the way that they expected to. Maybe they told their rabbi or spiritual leader something and they felt that nothing was done. And I get a lot of stories like that. Um, And I understand because of those stories why you're not willing to trust anybody else. But what happens is we do need to trust other people in this world. We can't go through life alone. We're designed to have relationships, have friendships, have marriages, all sorts of relationships, business relationships, etc. And the capacity to trust and be vulnerable with somebody else is vital for our mental health and for our happiness. And I see a lot of people, they say, I was burned. I'm not going to try this again. I'm just going to do everything alone. I'm not going to share anything. I'm not going to date. Um, and it's just not the right way to go. And again, I don't blame them. I understand them. And maybe right after something happened, you're not ready. And I get it. I do get it. But with a therapist and with the right help, I think to learn the balance of separating what was done to you and who was complicit versus the whole rest of the world. There are some good people in the world. There are some trustworthy people. Maybe it's not everyone, maybe it's not most, but it's somebody. And you don't need to be best friends with everybody, but you do need one intimate good friend, one absolutely trusting friend, or two. We need those. Because life is hard. And when we go through life hard together with somebody else, it's a game changer. When we have a simcha, we have a happy occasion, we share it with somebody else, it's a game changer. Even just casual relaxing and hanging out and going for coffee, or young people don't go for coffee, they go for iced coffees, right?
Right.
But whatever you do it with somebody else, it changes your whole life. And we need to get there. And I get that it's hard work, but we have to work towards that goal. Maybe it takes you 2 years, 3 years. Maybe meanwhile your friends are busy getting married, they're dating, they're having babies, there's all this pressure on you. Your parents don't understand why it's taking you so long and the whole world passed you up. I get it. I've spoken to 100 young people in that situation, but you do have to work towards that goal. And please God, with the right work, you'll get there.
How can we know who to trust when it comes to mental health? Because very often it's very sensitive topics, or it's something that could affect future shidduchim, or it could get somebody kicked out of an institution if you tell the wrong person. So, how should somebody know who that person is that they could trust and can open up to?
That's a fair question. And I think that there are trustworthy people in the world, and then there are people that say they are trustworthy, but they aren't. And then there are situations where they are trustworthy, but they still do have to inform other people, and I'm going to explain. There are definitely a fair share of authority figures, maybe they're teachers, maybe they're therapists, all sorts of people that say they'll keep your secrets quiet, but they won't. Um, and I think that real professionals will be professional, and part of being professional is you keep things very private. There are laws that if you break somebody's privacy, that the therapist can get in trouble. So real professionals, whether it's teachers, whether it's therapists, hopefully they're really ethical, and if they told you that they'll keep something a secret, hopefully they will. But there are situations, and this is important for people to know. There are situations where you share something and it is perceived to be a threat to you or to somebody else. And I'll give an example. Somebody comes to a teacher and says, I really want to murder somebody else in school. I have fantasies about it all the time. Now, if you laugh at that example, I'm telling you, I'm thinking of an example that I know about. There was a girl who said, I want to kill somebody else in this school. I have my reasons, and this is not a joke. I really want to kill her, and I have fantasies about it. It keeps me up at night. I have urges to do it. So you'd probably agree with me that that's something that girl who's being thought about, she should probably be informed to be safe and make decisions to leave the school, to stay in the school. Probably the police or somebody should be involved in this so that there's supervision. There are decisions that are made. When we talk about people who are not 18 in Western countries, then we have a whole extra set of laws where adults have the responsibility to tell certain people certain things. So you should be aware of that. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't tell people things. What it means is you should tell somebody trustworthy the information. First, you should approach your teacher or therapist and say, can I trust you with a secret? If I tell you something, Would you tell anybody else? Are there certain types of things that you have to report? If you would report them, what would happen? So I encourage you, ask those questions, feel comfortable, and when you're ready, share. But things that have to be shared because it's an emergency and it's dangerous and something's happening in school, I would encourage you to share. And I could even tell you a story. When I was 16 years old, I was in high school and there was a whole band of boys that were doing some really bad stuff. And I felt like I had to tell on them because they needed help for the bad stuff they were doing. But I didn't want to be a snitch. I'm not the snitch type. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't want them to beat me up. And at the same time, they were doing some really bad things as a group. And I turned to a very famous rabbi in New York, the Novominsker Rebbe, and I called him on the phone. I said, "What should I do?" And he said, "For their own sake, you should tell on them, and you should do it in a way that maybe news doesn't get out that you were the one that told on them. This way, you'll be protected. But for their own sake, they need help. They need therapy for what they're doing. The school needs to be protected from them. Other boys need to be protected from them." And they need to be protected from themselves so they can grow in the future. And I went and I told on them, and everybody got better. Everybody got better, and everybody got married, and there was a happy ending. So there are things like that. So there are people you could trust. Be an informed consumer. Ask your questions. There's no problem with asking. It never hurts to ask. You can usually intuit with your intuition who you can trust and who not. And you could take it from there and see what happens. I could tell you I've trusted a lot of great people in my life carefully. They were trustworthy people, and great things happened. And I could tell you that I meet all sorts of people that weren't careful, and they were asking all sorts of people all sorts of things, and news got out, and they got hurt, and everybody got hurt.
Mhm.
So do it smartly, but do it. I encourage you to ask for help and do what you need.
So you mentioned earlier suicide, and it's something that I wanted to talk about because it's something that comes up a lot that you hear people sometimes just in passing mentioning how, oh, I just want to die. I just want to kill myself. It's something that it's a term that is sometimes thrown around, or sometimes we think it to ourselves and it's not actually a serious situation. It's just this thought that pops in your head and then goes. So how are you supposed to know for yourself and for others whether to take that thought or that word more seriously, or whether to say, oh, this is just a joke or just a passing, it's just a phrase that they're using? How are you supposed to know?
Yeah, how are you supposed to know if somebody writes in a post or they say, "I want to die, I want to kill myself, I can't take this anymore"? People say all sorts of things. How do you know what they mean and how far to take it? So, look, it's impossible to truly know somebody's intentions because we're not mind readers. And there's nobody in the world that can absolutely know what somebody plans. There are legalities, there are legal ways because the world has to function somehow, right? So if somebody's standing on a roof and they say, "I want to kill myself, I want to kill myself," and they're standing on a roof, how do you know that they want to kill themselves? Maybe they are just saying it. So we have legalities in different countries where the police come and the police bring that person to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist asks them a bunch of questions. And after those questions, if they feel that the person told the answers that they wanted to hear, then they let them go. Does that mean they won't kill themselves 5 minutes later? It doesn't mean that. They still might kill themselves. And I've been a police officer because I volunteer in the police, and I've seen exactly that scenario. That's why I gave that case. There was a woman who was dangling her legs out of a floor like 25 floors up in a very tall building in Jerusalem, one of the tallest buildings around. And the police come and we do a whole chase, and she runs away.
Wow.
She's literally running away, and we run after her and we catch her. And we're very respectful and very gentle. "Do you want to hurt yourself? What's going on?" And she says, "Oh, I just wanted to see the view." And if you look in her history, this is a person that tried to harm themselves in the past. They have a history. So there's already red flags in the background in their history. We bring them to the psychiatrist in the hospital, and our job is to basically guard her from herself until the psychiatrist says she's not a danger. The psychiatrist says, "Do you want to harm yourself?" "Nope." So why were you on the 25th floor with your legs out? I just wanted to see the view. Are you sure that you don't want to harm yourself? Yeah, I'm fine. Okay, do you need anything else? No, I'm great. Thank you. Have a good day. That was it. Okay? So, you know, I don't know what happened to her until now, if she's alive or not. But what we could do is we could ask. Some people are afraid to ask, do you mean what you wrote in that post today? I'm worried about you. Hey, it's me, Avi or Rivka. I'm worried about you. You wrote today in your Facebook post that you want to kill yourself. Did you mean that you really want to kill yourself and end your life? Or was that something you were just saying? What did you mean by that? I care about you. And that's why I'm asking. And you don't have to worry about telling me the truth. I won't run right away and do anything. First, I'll hear you, and then we'll make a plan and see what to do. Okay? So we can ask. And like I said earlier, when we ask, it doesn't cause any harm. The person will either say, I actually do think of killing myself, or they'll say, no, I just was saying it. Okay? Even if they say, I actually have thoughts of killing myself, you can then ask another question. Do you have a specific plan or method of killing yourself that you thought of already? And if they're even more specific, they say, yes, I have a rope. Yes, I have access to my father's gun. Yes, I already picked a building. I know how to get in. That's really, really worrisome. So we have these two questions. What did you mean? Did you really mean? Do you have real plans or thoughts of wanting to kill yourself? Do you have a very specific way of doing so? Right? I want to say that again for clarification. Question A is, do you actually have thoughts of killing yourself? A, yes or no? Thoughts. And if you have thoughts, do you have a plan? Okay, it's that two-tiered question. What is your plan? Okay, we find in studies that if somebody is more and more specific, it's more and more worrisome and dangerous. Okay, none of these things are guaranteed. None are guaranteed. And it's very hard to protect somebody from harming themselves. We see even in hospitals where people are admitted, people harm themselves. In jail, they harm themselves. At home, they harm themselves. So, you can't live with somebody 24/7. But what you can do is you can try to determine if they're at risk, and you can try to connect them to help and let the professionals figure out with them and their family what to do. That we can do. And then the professional will work with them.
If their response is yes, I meant what I said, and yes, I have a plan, then what's your next step as a friend or as a family member who cares about them?
I would say, I'm really worried about you. And this is one of those things that I learned that no matter what, I have to take absolutely seriously. And I have to, together with you, we'll make a plan of how to do it, but we have to inform people that can watch over you. It can be your parents, it could be your teacher, it could be an ambulance, it could be however, and we'll make a plan together because everyone has a different preference of how to do it. But to just pretend I didn't hear what you said and walk home and pretend nothing happened, I'm not able to do it because I care that much about you. So we're going to make a plan together. Do you need me to call an ambulance? Do you want me to call for you? Do you want me to go with you? Okay, and these are all the types of things we can offer. It's hard to answer these types of questions on one foot. There are whole courses on this, exactly how to negotiate those conversations. But the simple idea is definitely we can't leave them alone, and at the same time, that doesn't mean they have no choice. The more choice a person has, the better. We can offer them choices. We can go with them, support them. We can figure out how to word something, and that makes people much more comfortable to get the help that they need.
So, this leads me into my next question in the more broader sense of helping a friend or family member who is struggling with their mental health. Um, Not only necessarily because of suicidal thoughts or plans, but just in general. How can we, on the one hand, be there as a help and support, but on the other hand, not get dragged ourselves into their problems to the point that their problems almost become now our problem?
Wow, that is such an important question. I could tell that you're an educator from that question because that's like the question that I've heard so many times from people of this age group. Not only from this age group, obviously, but what happens is people become codependent. People for various reasons, intertwine their mental health with somebody else's well being and make it dependent on the other person. And one of the most simplest reasons why they do it is they feel the whole world is on their shoulders. They're the only one in the world that this girl or boy is willing to open up to trust, to talk to. And so if I don't save their life, they're as good as dead. I have to carry the entire world on my shoulders. And if I take a break for 1 second, something might happen. And that anxiety and that worldview that it's all on me locks them into being 24/7 involved, way over their head in what's going on, taking too much responsibility, and then their own mental health deteriorates, their own dreams and goals that they were supposed to pursue in school or life or whatever deteriorates, and their ability even to help their own friend deteriorates. And sometimes we help somebody so much to the exclusion of involving a teacher, involving a therapist, involving their parents, that they don't even get the help that they needed anyways. And I would say, as a mental health professional, as a EMS professional, and an EMT, as a volunteer police officer, as all the different hats and roles that I have in crisis, you can never help somebody in crisis alone. You need a team, and the team can be two friends and a teacher and a therapist and the parents. That's a fine team, but it can't be you to the exclusion of everybody else. And you can't watch somebody 24/7. You can't force somebody to take their medication. You can't force them to get in therapy. We're very, very limited. I think we overestimate how powerful we are. We're very small people. We can talk, we can offer, we can ask and encourage, but that's all we can do. And a lot of times people who are at risk of suicide, for example, they still end their life. And you could have done all the right things and they still ended their life, and it's not your fault. Because then people end their life and then you have certain guilt your whole life. I could have done it better. I should have watched her more. We can't. There's the reasonable amount of steps we could take, and then there's all the rest. You can punch in, you can do your work, and you can leave. And that's it. And maybe what you can offer every day is one phone check in. Maybe it's one 25-minute conversation. Maybe it's a home visit once a week, but it can't be 24/7. That's when we get to burnout. That's when we get to um, a complete crash of your own mental health, and that didn't do anybody a favor.
I really resonate with what you said, that it's this, you get this feeling that you're the only person that this person has confided in, and therefore it all falls on you because you're the only one that they trust. But I guess that also goes back to what you said earlier, that there are certain things that have been shared with you, maybe in confidence, that you are then obligated to pass on to others to be able to actually help the person properly. So definitely relate to that.
And by the way, and I'll tag back onto you that if somebody comes to me and asks if they can speak to me, I've already done this so many times that I would preempt them and I would say, I am here to help you. I will do anything that I can to help you. I care about you. I will try to be as private and trustworthy as possible. There might be some things that if you tell them to me, I might be obligated for your own good to work with you and see how to help you, but I might need to tell other people only for your own good. And if I didn't think it's for your own good, I wouldn't even bother and I would never break your trust. But I want you to know that, and I want to be upfront in advance so we're on the same page.
That's really
And
helpful.
I think if you say that the right way and you really show that you care in your actions and you act that way before this conversation, during the conversation, and afterwards, then I think that that's a winning team. They'll trust you, and together you can get them the help that they need. And that's really the best way to do it.
Another term that gets thrown around is I'm having a mental breakdown. We say that a lot without actually meaning it, but it is a real thing. So what is a mental breakdown?
What's a mental breakdown? So, you know, every profession, when you talk about the level of professionals that do that profession, they have their own language, their own uh, vocabulary. And if you talk as a doctor and you're talking about somebody with a strep throat to another doctor, you'll use very special language because the doctors both understand that language. If you're a computer technician and you're talking to another technician, you'll use fancy code words and computer words that I don't even know how to say. So psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, mental health workers, they also have those types of words. Um, and then you have general society, random people, whether they're teachers, whether they're store owners, parents, all sorts of people that maybe aren't a psychologist, and they're referring to something. So there's a professional, fancy word for it. And then there's the way that people in society on television and the radio and the books, how they talk about it. So mental breakdown is one of those. It's like a slang word. It's not necessarily referring to something specific, and we don't really know what they mean unless we know the details of that case. And that would be different than if I said, um, Rivka struggles with bipolar disorder. She was hospitalized last month. She was very, very psychotic and tried to cut herself. That's very, very specific, right? And when somebody says Rivka had a mental breakdown, maybe it refers to that. But maybe it just refers to she was so overwhelmed by her parents' divorce that she just started screaming and crying uncontrollably one night for 2 hours and no one can console her. Well, that's different than being hospitalized for a manic episode. So it really depends. It's not a specific word. It's like somebody saying, I don't feel good. And nobody knows what it means. But if you ask their symptoms and you're a medic in the ambulance like I am, what does it mean they don't feel good? It means that they're dizzy. I take their blood pressure and see it's very high or very low. They haven't eaten in a few days. They can barely stand up without falling back down. That's what they mean. I would therefore encourage people, by the way, to learn basic common words about mental health issues that a lot of people have around us. Um, what are the words? You don't have to be a psychologist to know the words. What's addiction? What's depression? What's an eating disorder? What are the signs and symptoms? There are courses, classes, videos that anybody can learn. And now it makes it easier for me to talk with my friend about how to help Rivka because you and I are friends in seminary and we see that Rivka's struggling. And now we have that common language to narrow down how she's struggling and who to turn to and what we think she needs.
So what would some of those common words be that would be helpful to know that come up for girls specifically?
When you use the words girls specifically, the first thing that pops into mind is body dysmorphia, is eating disorders. That's the start. That's girls specifically. Not that boys don't have eating disorders or body image issues and things like that, because they also do. But it's more predominant in girls, and that could be for cultural reasons. That could be for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of expectations and pressure on girls to look a certain way and eat a certain way and act a certain way. But I would start with eating disorders and body image issues. And then we would go to all the common things, which is depression, anxiety, addiction. We can talk about self harm. We can talk about suicidality, which, by the way, those are not mental health disorders, but they're certainly a problem, right? Just like a girl whose parents are going through a terrible, nasty divorce, that's not a mental health disorder, but it's certainly something that profoundly challenges her well being, right? So it doesn't have to be a disorder to be a problem. And that people don't always get that idea. There's way more than what I just said because when you look at the book of mental health disorders, there's all these fancy categories, but there's way more problems than those categories. You talk about a girl that is a people pleaser, whatever that means. And anytime somebody asks her for money, she just spends all of her money and buys other people things. You would agree with me that that's an issue. Um, that's not necessarily not depression, not anxiety, not psychosis, not addiction, not body dysmorphia, not an eating disorder.
Right.
So there's a lot of problems that aren't in these books, but we have to be privy to, is everybody feeling okay? Am I worried about somebody? Maybe I don't even know what to call it, but we should talk about it and see what to do.
What would you say is a common factor or common factors that you do find in people's lives who do struggle with their mental health? And how can this awareness better help us prevent or overcome mental health challenges if we do fall into those categories, or to, like, by knowing that we're more susceptible?
This is a massive question. It's going to be hard to answer this one. There are definitely more risk factors that make people more susceptible to mental health challenges. And there's also protective factors that help people more likely to recover and heal or be protected from not even developing mental health challenges. And when we talk about younger people, students, young girls, there are some of the protective factors and risk factors that aren't connected to them. They're connected to their parents. For example, if their parents work on their marriage, then that would be better for the mental health of all the kids in the family. But that's not necessarily something easy that this girl can go to her parents and say, "Hey, work on your marriage so I feel better." So there are factors like that, and then there are factors like educational factors where we said earlier in this interview that let's say somebody is not doing well in school for any sort of reason, and it could be a simple reason as they just moved to another country and don't know the language. It could be that they have ADHD. It could be that, who knows? And when they're not doing well in school, that profoundly impacts their mental health. It could also be, by the way, socially, if somebody is not doing well socially, because let's say in this culture of this school during recess you play sports, and I'm saying this as a boy. I don't know what the girls do during recess. I was never a girl, but I was a boy. But I could say that, when I was younger, you would play sports during the break. So if you weren't good at sports, maybe because your father never mentored you in how to play sports, you don't know the rules of the game, you don't know how to throw the ball well, people are going to make fun of you, they're going to bully you. I could tell you this, I could say about girls, um, having worked with many girls and having a sister and having daughters and a wife, that there are things that girls are expected to do in their own circles that if they're not good at those things socially, they're going to be up the creek. So let's say it's dressing a certain way, putting themselves together, whatever the tasks are that a successful girl in that school is expected to do. She's expected to make her hair look a certain way. If she doesn't do it, she's going to be an outcast and she's going to be bullied. She's going to be isolated. Um, and so those things very much affect mental health. A lot of times there are kids that they want the type of shoes that everyone buys, and the parents are struggling financially and they say no to the shoes, and because of that, now the girl or the boy doesn't fit in, and everyone makes fun of them because they have the cheap shoes, right? And those are real things. The bar mitzvah, the bas mitzvah, what everyone does. Now, I'm not saying always you have to do what everyone does, and every student always says what everyone does, and they have to know really what everyone does versus what they think everyone does. But we said when the family is doing well, a young person is going to do well. When the person is doing well academically in school, it's going to help them with their mental health. And that's where it's important for us to spend time doing our homework, even though that's not fun, getting somebody to sit down with us and review the material with us. If it's parents hiring a mentor, somebody to kind of help them in school. We spoke about socially, very important. Sometimes people need coaching. Sometimes a girl had some sort of a mother. Maybe the mother died of cancer 10 years ago, and she didn't have a mother to see how to put on makeup and how to do certain things. She doesn't have that person in her life. So to connect her to that sort of mentor, to get mentorship. Maybe it's in therapy. Somebody doesn't always know how to make friends. You can role play with them when you walk into a room in the dormitory and girls are busy talking together, or they're at lunch, and you want to get in the conversation and be like everybody else. How do you jump in? How do you not take over the whole conversation? What's the right way of schmoozing and talking with other people? These are things that people sometimes need to be walked through. Obviously, there are many other things to cover this big topic. When we work on ourselves, all I know is when we work on ourselves in any way and in all ways in life, we always get better in all the other ways. It always helps you. When I make a good decision with this area, it helps in that area later on. It gives me more. In the professional world, we call it recovery capital. It gives me more capital, more resources. If I'm better at controlling my temper, it's going to help me socially. If it helps me socially, it's going to help with my mental health. If it helps with my mental health, I'm going to be in a better mood. People are going to want to do projects with me in school. And then I'm going to get better people to do the projects. The projects are going to be better. I'm going to rise higher in status. It's this one big funny machine that when you do, even if you can only do a little good thing today, a tiny thing, do that. And it's going to help you move to the next place.
So how can someone choose what that thing would be? Because we've spoken about so many different things that people struggle with and so many different topics. So how can we kind of zoom in on the one thing that we want to work on that will have that domino effect? And obviously it would be different, but how do we decide what that should be for us?
Look, a lot of us have very complicated situations, many multiple problems. Our family is problematic. Maybe we can't even go back home because we get abused. Maybe we don't have any money as a result, and 100 problems, social problems, financial problems, academic, everything. Even with 100 problems, we can always rank the top one or two. And we can ask ourselves questions like, what's the biggest problem that if I tackled it right now, it would help me work on the other ones? I give whole courses on this because there's a very particular set of questions that you have to ask yourself or ask somebody else. Like, but it really works that way. What's the biggest thing that if I did this right now, it would increase my chances of being willing to go to therapy or being safer or being less likely to be with that boy who keeps pressuring me to give my body to him or whatever the topic is. Um, Sometimes a person needs to work on going to sleep on time in order to get up on time, in order to go through their day, in order to work on themselves. So you have to go 3 steps back just to take that step forward, and that's okay. Start in the most important place that you perceive is important, and if you're not sure, that's fine. That's why we have friends, we have mentors, teachers, therapists. We go to somebody that we trust, and it can be one conversation, it can be 10, and with that trusted person, we hash that out till we figure it out. And you don't need to know perfectly where to start. I'm just telling you. You don't need to know perfectly. You just need to want to start and try your best. Usually, when we start with something small and attainable, we see that we succeed. And from there, we can kind of build up and scale up. There are famous people. I can drop 2 names now on YouTube if you want to learn more about this topic. There's a famous video on YouTube from a guy, Admiral McRaven. Admiral McRaven was an admiral in the United States Navy. He has this famous video, it has like 20 million views, about how to start from somewhere. And he says, make your bed. Make your bed. The famous psychologist Jordan Peterson from Canada says, clean your room. It's the same idea. Clean your room, meaning when I don't even know where to start, but I make my bed, I already made order out of chaos in my life. I did something that I earned some self respect. I felt a little bit good. I can do something. Maybe I need to work on my food and my eating habits. And maybe I can't stop eating the way that I did drastically. Maybe it's not safe to do that. Maybe I don't have the self control, but I can make a tiny little choice. Instead of eating 3 chocolate bars today, I'll have one. And we shouldn't laugh at that. And from there, that's where you get to the next level till you succeed.
So I guess be humble enough to start small, somewhere where you can
Yeah.
accomplish whatever you set yourself to do so that you'll get
And
the
believe it
motivation
will
to
take you there.
continue.
It will give you the motivation and it will give you more resources because the more you work on yourself, the more you build yourself. Your character gets bigger. And now there's more of you tomorrow to tackle tomorrow's problems. And when you do that, it will make even more of you for 2 days from now's problems. People don't realize that, but it's exponential and it's worth it. It's very hard for people to measure little successes. They laugh at it, but it's a big deal. And from little things, you get to big places.
Wow, that's definitely a great way to end off. Thank you. I have one last question that I ask my guests, which is going back to the time where you left home for the first time, whether it was for yeshiva or college. If you were able to tell yourself one thing, only one thing, to that version of yourself that had just left home, what would the one thing be that you would tell yourself?
It's going to be okay. Ask for help. You'll figure it out. When I first left home, it was terrible. I hated it for weeks and weeks in a row. I said, I can't do this. I don't want to be here. I just want to go home. I really remember that. And what's funny is I ended up buying a house here, marrying a wife here, having kids here,
Wow.
living here since that day till now. But I said, there's no way I'm ever going to make it. I hate it with all my guts. There's no chance. But when you stick it out and you learn and you solve one problem and two problems and three problems, you start to settle in. You ask for some help. I wasn't good back then at asking for help, but ask for help. How do I get a fan? How do I get to the doctor? How do I make friends? Whatever it is that you need, ask for help, solve those problems, and you'll settle in.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for all of this insight. I know we covered a lot of different things. Thank you for being able to just tie it all together so well. And I'm sure this is going to help a lot of people. It's helped me so far. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of On Your Own. If you like this episode or think it will be useful to someone else, please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. I would love to connect with you. If you've got any questions, feedback, or ideas for future episodes, you can email me at onyourownpodcast@gmail.com. See you next week. And in the meantime, happy adulting.